The inspector's pen hovers over the violation notice. Sepp Holzer watches from his hillside, arms crossed, surrounded by citrus trees that shouldn't exist at this altitude. It's 1989 in the Austrian Alps. The temperature outside is barely above freezing, yet lemons hang heavy on branches where only spruce should grow. The official doesn't understand what he's seeing. Neither do the neighbors who farm flat fields below, dragging hoses through cracked soil every summer, watching their crops wither despite constant irrigation. Holes are buried wood, tons of it, rotting logs stacked in trenches, covered with soil, transformed into mounds that act like underground reservoirs. No hoses, no sprinklers, no daily watering ritual. For 20 years, these beds have produced abundance, while neighboring farms struggle through every drought. And the inspector hands Holzer his 47th fine. Holzer smiles. He's been called the most fine farmer in Austria, but his yields silence every critic. This is the story they don't want you to know. The lazy garden method that waters itself for decades. The ancient mountain technique that modern agriculture buried because it couldn't be sold, packaged, or controlled. Today, you'll discover 3 principles that make self-watering gardens possible, and why the second principle is the trap that ruins most attempts before the first harvest. If you believe nature already solved problems, we keep trying to engineer, subscribe to Nature Unearthed, and join us. Because the solutions we forgot might be the ones that save our soil, our water, and our future. Let's go back to 1978, southern Austria, steep slopes, thin soil, whom every farming manual says the same thing. Flatten the land, clear the debris, plant in rows. Sepp Holzer looks at those manuals and sees a lie. The mountains taught him something different. In the forest, nothing is flat. Fallen trees rot where they land. The soil beneath them stays moist even in August. Mushrooms explode from the decay. Saplings thrive in the shadow of dead wood. Nature doesn't flatten. Nature builds layers. So Holzer starts digging trenches across his property. His neighbors think he's lost his mind. He drags logs from the woods, pine, maple, birch, some so rotten they crumble in his hands. He stacks them in the trenches like he's building a fortress underground. Branches fill the gaps. Leaves and grass clippings pack every crevice. Then he buries it all. Mounds rise across his farm, some 3 feet high, others taller, when they look like burial mounds for giants. Within months, he's planting potatoes, squash, tomatoes, and then the impossible, citrus trees. The agricultural authorities arrive in 1986. They measure his terraces, they inspect his ponds, they write violation after violation, illegal water retention structures, unapproved land modification, erosion risk. The fines pile up, thousands of shillings, then euros. Holzer pays them and keeps building. By 1992, the threats escalate. The Agricultural Board wants to seize his farm. Holzer invites them to inspect his yields. The officials walk his terraces in silence. Lemons, kiwis, grapes, root vegetables exploding from soil that never sees a hose. The evidence is undeniable. His farm produces 10 times more food per acre than any conventional operation in the region, without chemical fertilizers, and without irrigation systems, without the expensive inputs that keep farmers dependent on suppliers. The fines continue, but the world starts paying attention because Holzer proves something dangerous to the industrial agriculture complex. You don't need them. Remember this moment. It's the foundation of everything we're about to uncover. Here's what they don't teach you in gardening books. Dead wood isn't dead. It's a storage system millions of years in the making. When a tree dies, its cell walls, made of lignin and cellulose, form a labyrinth of microscopic tunnels. As fungi and bacteria begin their work, those tunnels open wider. Water floods in. Laboratory tests prove it. Heavily decomposed pine logs absorb water equal to 5 times their dry weight. Over 500% water retention. Oak, slower to break down, and still doubles or triples its mass with moisture. This isn't theory, it's physics. Now picture this buried underground, capped with soil, surrounded by roots. You've just created a reservoir that refills itself with every rain. In July, when your neighbor's garden wilts and the hose runs for hours every evening, you drive a moisture probe into your Hügelkultur mound, 40 to 60% soil moisture. even when the top layer cracks in the sun. The buried logs below, swollen with water, release it slowly to the roots above. A Pacific Northwest gardener shares her story online. Second year after building my mound, I put the hose away. Haven't used it since. The soil just stays moist. An urban grower in Colorado reports the same thing. His Hügelkultur bed sailed through a record-breaking heat wave while his neighbor's conventional raised beds turned to dust. The secret isn't magic, it's the structure of decay. As wood breaks down, its density drops. That chunk of pine that started solid enough to sink becomes lighter than water, porous, airy, like a natural sponge. Every gram of degraded wood traps several grams of water. For you, this means freedom. Freedom from dragging hoses. Freedom from watching your water bill climb every summer. Freedom from losing crops to drought. Build the mound once. Let the wood do the work for decades. This is what industrial agriculture doesn't want you to discover. Because once you realize you can store water for free, you stop buying their irrigation systems. You stop depending on their infrastructure. You become ungovernable. But water storage is only the first principle. The second one is where most people fail. And it's critical you understand it before you dig your first trench. A permaculture enthusiast in Oregon builds her first Hügelkultur mound. She follows the instructions perfectly. Old logs, branches, soil, mulch. She plants her seedlings with excitement. 3 weeks later, her plants are yellow, stunted, barely growing. She panics. Did she do something wrong? Is the wood toxic? Number. She fell into the nitrogen trap. Here's what's happening beneath the soil. As wood begins to decompose, fungi and bacteria swarm to break down the lignin and cellulose. That process requires massive amounts of nitrogen. If you don't give them nitrogen, they'll steal it. From where? From your plants. The microbes don't care about your tomatoes. They're hungry. And they'll strip every molecule of nitrogen from the surrounding soil to fuel their feast. Your plants starve while sitting on top of a future gold mine. This is the mistake Big Ag loves. Because when your Hügelkultur mound fails in year 1, you give up. You go back to buying their fertilizers, their soil amendments, their solutions. They win. You lose. But our ancestors knew the fix. It's simple. Feed the microbes so they don't feed on your plants. Layer nitrogen-rich materials directly on top of the wood before you add soil. Grass clippings, fresh manure, coffee grounds, kitchen scraps, even urine if you're brave enough. Think of it as a nitrogen buffer zone. The microbes get their feast, your plants get their nutrients. Everyone wins. That Oregon gardener? She dug back into her mound. I added 2 wheelbarrows of fresh compost and a thick layer of grass clippings. Within 3 weeks, her plants exploded with growth. By season's end, she had the biggest harvest she'd ever seen. Remember this, buried wood is hungry in the first year. Feed it nitrogen up front, and it'll feed your garden for the next 20 years. Skip this step, and you'll wonder why everyone says Hügelkultur doesn't work. It works, but only if you understand what's happening beneath the surface. This is knowledge they buried along with the technique. Because when you fail, you blame the method, not the missing instructions. Now you know better. But there's a third principle that transforms this from a water-saving trick into a perpetual abundance machine. Winter in the Austrian Alps. Snow covers Holzer's terraces. When the temperature drops below freezing for weeks. Yet his garden beds radiate warmth. Place your hand on the soil above buried wood in January. It's warmer than the air around it. Sometimes several degrees warmer. This isn't mysticism, it's thermodynamics. Decomposition is an exothermic process. Every bite of wood that fungi and bacteria consume releases heat. Slow, steady, reliable heat. In spring, this changes everything. Seeds germinate earlier. Frost that would kill seedlings on flat ground passes harmlessly over these mounds, buffered by the warmth rising from below. In autumn, the growing season extends. Tomatoes ripen weeks after neighboring gardens have withered. But the heat is just the beginning. As years pass, the buried wood transforms from energy source into a trust fund for your soil. Hardwoods like oak and maple take 20 years to fully decompose. During that entire time, they release nutrients at a pace that matches plant needs. Nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium. Not all at once in a chemical burn. Slowly, steadily, year after year. There are no boom and bust cycles, no spring flush followed by summer starvation. The soil receives a continuous infusion of fertility. Field trials confirm what Holzer witnessed on his terraces. A well-built Hügelkultur bed can feed crops for 20 years or more without added fertilizer. The nutrients aren't washed away by rain or burned off by sun. They're locked inside the wood, released only as microbes finish their patient work. Even after a decade, soil from the heart of a mound tests higher for nitrogen and phosphorus than surrounding ground. A retired teacher in Michigan shares her experience. I built my first mound in 2015 with storm-felled maple logs. I haven't bought fertilizer since. My tomatoes get bigger every year. This is a legacy system. Plant it once. Your grandchildren harvest from it. Compare that to conventional gardening. Buy fertilizer every spring. Watch half of it wash away with the first heavy rain. Repeat the cycle until you're broke or exhausted. Industrial agriculture loves that cycle. It keeps you dependent. It keeps you buying. Hügelkultur breaks the cycle. But here's the question nobody asks. If this method works so well, why did it disappear? Why aren't we all building these mounds? The answer reveals everything about who profits from your ignorance. After 1920, everything changed. Tractors rolled onto farms. Combines harvested in straight lines. Efficiency became measured in acres per hour, not harvest per acre. Mounds don't work with machines. Flat fields do. So the technique died, not because it failed, because it didn't fit the industrial model. Agricultural extension offices rewrote their manuals. Universities stopped teaching the old methods. The knowledge transferred from generation to generation for centuries vanished in a single lifetime. Why? Because buried wood can't be sold. It can't be patented. It can't be controlled by corporations. You can't make money from people who grow their own fertility. You can't sell irrigation systems to gardens that water themselves. The industrial agriculture complex profits from dependence, from farmers and gardeners who need their products season after season. Hügelkultur threatens that model, so it was buried, literally and figuratively, but Holzer remembered, and he refused to forget. His 47 fines were the price of rebellion. His citrus trees in the snow were the proof that nature's wisdom outlasts bureaucracy. Now you know what he knew. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Start with the foundation, the biggest, oldest, most rotten logs you can find. Hardwoods work best. Oak, maple, hickory. They break down slowly and feed the soil for decades. Never use cedar, walnut, or treated lumber. These woods contain compounds that poison soil and stunt plant growth. Dig your trench directly on top of grass. No need to remove sod. It'll decompose and add nutrients. Stack the logs tightly. Fill every gap with smaller branches and twigs. This isn't a loose pile. Air pockets become sinkholes as the wood settles. Next, why the critical step most people skip? Pack every crevice with nitrogen-rich greens, grass clippings, fresh manure, kitchen scraps, coffee grounds. Layer it thick. This is your insurance policy against the nitrogen trap. Once your nitrogen buffer is in place, cap the mound with 12 inches of topsoil. Add a thick layer of mulch on top, wood chips, straw, or leaves. Water it well during the first year. The wood needs to start absorbing moisture. After that, the mound handles everything. Your mound will settle over the first 2 years as the wood begins to compress. That's normal. You can add more soil as needed. But once established, that mound becomes a perpetual abundance machine. Plant anything: tomatoes, squash, herbs, perennials. The roots will find water 12 months a year. The nutrients will flow for 20 years or more. You'll watch your neighbors drag hoses every evening while your garden thrives untouched. You'll see their plants yellow from over-fertilizing while yours grow darker and stronger year after year. They'll ask what your secret is. Tell them. Share this knowledge. Because the more people who build these mounds, the less power the industrial system has over our food supply. A suburban homeowner in Ohio turned last year's storm damage into 3 serpentine Hügelkultur beds winding through his backyard. He tracked every dollar saved. No bags of fertilizer purchased in 2 years. No weekly irrigation, just kitchen scraps and autumn leaves layered into the mounds each season. His water bill dropped so dramatically that the utility company sent a notice asking if his meter was broken. By the end of year two, his harvest filled his basement shelves and still left enough to share with 5 neighboring families. The savings paid for his seed orders 3 times over. A retired nurse in New Mexico built her first mound in the high desert, where annual rainfall barely reaches 8 inches. She used cottonwood logs from a downed tree and packed the gaps with rabbit manure from a neighbor's hutches. Her first summer, she watered twice a week out of habit and worry. Her second summer, she watered once a month. Her third summer, she stopped watering entirely. The tomatoes kept producing. The squash vines sprawled across the mound. Her neighbors asked how she was sneaking water to her garden during the drought restrictions. She wasn't. The wood below held moisture from winter snowmelt through the scorching August heat. Not every story starts with triumph. A young couple in Vermont skipped the nitrogen layer completely. They'd read about Hügelkultur online, saw the promises, and jumped in with enthusiasm. They stacked logs, covered them with soil, and planted immediately. Within a month, their seedlings turned pale yellow. Growth stalled. Some plants died. They nearly gave up, but they dug back into the mound, exposed the logs, and layered on 5 wheelbarrows of aged horse manure mixed with grass clippings. They replanted. 3 weeks later, the transformation was undeniable. Dark green leaves, vigorous growth. By harvest time, they were believers. Their mistake became their most valuable lesson. The wood must be fed first. Now they teach workshops in their community, showing others how to avoid the nitrogen trap that almost ended their experiment. Each story carries the same truth. Bury the wood correctly, and the ground gives back for decades. Droughts are intensifying. Water restrictions are spreading. Fertilizer prices are climbing. Meanwhile, millions of people rake up branches every autumn and burn them, destroying free water storage, destroying free fertilizer, destroying 2 decades of abundance in a single afternoon. You know better now. Every branch you bury is a small act of rebellion. Every mound you build is a declaration of independence from the system that profits from scarcity. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't about returning to some imaginary past. This is about building soil that outlives you, creating gardens that feed your children and their children. The ground remembers what you give it. Sepp Holzer's terraces still produce citrus in the Alps. The mounds he built in the 1980s still hold water through every drought. His legacy isn't measured in fines paid or battles won. It's measured in the abundance that refuses to die. What legacy will your garden leave? Start today. Find the oldest logs you can. Dig your first trench. Pack it with nitrogen-rich greens and cover it with soil. 1 year from now, you'll watch your neighbors struggle while your garden thrives with 0 effort. 5 years from now, your yields will be legendary. 20 years from now, your grandchildren will harvest from the same mound. They buried this knowledge because it makes you free. Now you're bringing it back. Share this video. Build your mound. Teach others. Because every person who rediscovers this ancient wisdom is one less person dependent on the system. To drop a comment below sharing your biggest takeaway. Tell us if you're ready to build your first Hügelkultur mound. Let us know what you're planning to grow. The rebellion starts in your backyard. Let's grow.